Welcome to part 5 of the video series on how I constructed this arts and crafts style round table. This video focuses on the upper cross members. They interlock together through a half-lap joint. This half-lap joint is easily made on the table saw using a standard blade. On the authentic table, the cross members are connected to the legs with a dovetail, whereas on the imposter table, it's just a stub tenon. Both methods provide adequate strength, but the stub tenon's a little easier to make. After cutting the cross members to length, I'll start to make the dovetails on the authentic table's cross members. I've got the workpiece clamped to a backer board, and I slowly move it through the dovetail bit to cut one side of the dovetail. Flip the board over, clamp it to the backer board, and run it through to cut the other side. To make the socket for the dovetail on the legs, I use the same router bit on the router table, but I'll come at it from each direction to center the socket on the legs. The router table takes care of most of the work, but I still have a lot of cleanup to do with chisels. On the back side of the dovetail, I need to round it off slightly to match the profile of the router bit. Taking the time to shape both pieces of this joint so they fit perfectly really pays off in strength of this mechanical joint. Making the stub tenons for the imposter table is done with just 4 cuts on the table saw. Since these are relatively small pieces, I can just stand them up to make the 3rd and 4th cut, and the stub tenon is formed. Making the open mortise for the stub tenon to fit into is similar to what we did with the dovetail socket, but it's done with a straight bit. Again, I come at it from both sides to make sure that I've centered the open mortise on the top of the leg. This too requires a little bit of cleanup, but it's just squaring up the open mortise to match the stub tenon. To cut the half-lap joints on the cross members, I've set up 2 stop blocks on my cross-cut sled, and this represents the entire width that I'll remove from each cross member. So I make the far left and right cuts and then just remove the material in the middle. This method is a little tedious compared to using a dado saw blade, but I find that the trade-off in time saved by not having to install my dado set is worth it. After I've cleaned out the bulk of the material, I can move the piece back and forth over the spinning blade and flatten out the bottom of the dado. The interlocking fit should be a nice tight fit with no gaps between either board. Since the top of the table will be screwed to these cross members, we need to allow for seasonal expansion and contraction. To do this, we use the motorized router lift to make a 2-tiered stepped hole. The first is a 1/2 inch wide hole, and the second is a hole that goes all the way through using a 1/4 inch bit. Using this method, we've created an oblong hole for the screw to go into that's recessed on the underside of the table. This will allow for the tabletop to expand and contract across its width. Well, that does it for this part of the video, but I invite you to check out the all-new Eagle Lake Woodworking to see the rest of the videos in this series and videos on other woodworking topics. You can access all parts of the videos in one easy viewer. Check out the photo galleries of in-process work, measured drawings, and finished projects. You can also download files associated with projects. So check it out at www.eaglelakewoodworking.com.